Welcome back to the Reverend and the Reprobate. I am Lucas Pinkard, an actual Reverend. Alongside me is the guy who I let be on my show, Stanley Gibson, the fun one.
The fun one,
AKA
the funny
the
one,
Reprobate.
the handsome, and really just stellar interviewer.
Yeah,
as
yeah,
we all
no
find
doubt.
out today with Doug TenNapel.
Doug TenNapel. So Doug is somebody that we've been trying to get on for such a long time.
We're both big fans.
Huge
You
fans of
especially are a huge
Earthworm
fan.
Jim, of Bigfoot Bill, of Neverhood, of the new Veggie Tales series. And if you don't like it, then that just means you don't know how to judge good art. That's fine. But this interview is one that's unlike, and I'm not just saying this to promote the interview on our show, it's unlike anything I've seen with Doug so far. Normally he's very high energy. He can be a little brash. He's funny, and he is all of those things in moments during this. But we got to talk to Doug about what it's like being a creative person in Hollywood, finding the balance between a Hollywood that tells you not to include Jesus, a Christian community that tells you don't include Jesus enough, and then this third new progressive Christianity that's kind of coming around. They're like, well, we want the morals and values of Jesus, but just not Jesus. And where
Jesus is a bit divisive.
Yeah. And so where you find the strength to make the art that's been put in your heart by the Lord once you become a Christian, and then what the future of artistry looks like, and how you find that balance in doing good art that also points people to the cross. It was a really sincere Doug. It got a little emotional a couple of times, not because he was angry or upset with anything, but just because the guy was showing parts of his heart that
He's very
that I haven't
passionate.
seen. Oh man, and it always does us good to compliment our guests, right? But the way he talks about making art is very. It's not ethereal. It's very tangible. Like, this seems like something that if I want to do art, then I can wrap my head around, is the way that he's talking about it. It's not the whole crazy, like when you typically hear artists, they're like, no, you need to go and you need to go and you need to clear your mind and whatever. No, Doug's like, these are the things that are in your heart. This is what's been put there. You find a way to get those things out in a way that's good and going on. And it was just a really great, very sincere interview, and one that I really think that y'all enjoy, especially if you're a Doug TenNapel fan. This is an interview unlike one that I've seen with him before, so check it out. Thanks, Doug TenNapel, for coming on. We hope you guys enjoy it. Joining us today is one of the guys that we wanted to interview since we started this podcast,
Doug.
the creator of Earthworm Jim, also of Bigfoot Bill, the guy that did all of the album art for the Five Iron Frenzy albums, and possibly the most brilliantly subversive Christian on the internet today, Doug TenNapel.
Doug TenNapel, the Don Draper of being canceled.
What's going on, Doug?
I'm a bad influence on your whole audience. I feel bad for them already. I apologize for getting you canceled and destroying this whole show.
That's probably the best publicity that we could get at this point, would be to get canceled.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, because it didn't hurt the Goya Beans guys, and it certainly isn't hurting My Pillow's sales. So, one of the things that I just want to touch on and get off of it, I'm sure you're tired of talking about it. You have the Earthworm Jim 2 book that is getting ready to come out. I think it's set for February. I got in early on the Indiegogo, so I get one of the limited edition copies. Thank you, my mom and my wife, for making that happen. But that's still an active campaign on Indiegogo. If people want to check it out, and
it'll be
contribute to
open
that.
for at least another month.
Right on.
So go to Indiegogo, you put your credit card information in. There is a tier where you can get, so this is for Earthworm Jim 2, Fight the Fish, but you can get Earthworm Jim 1 still. On one of the tiers, there's a catch-up tier where you can get 1 and 2, or you can get 1 and 2 and the making of Earthworm Jim, where I go into the step-by-step, how the entire team was put together and how I created Earthworm Jim in the first place. It is for every Earthworm Jim fan. It's a very rare, these are all 3 very rare books. They're about $25 each, but they're hardbound, 160 pages, 9-inch by 12-inch. They've got gold gilded edges. I do all the embossing and debossing. This is the highest end beautiful books. That's my art form. My form of expression is I make big, beautiful books and I tell rip-roaring stories.
And we will do, as soon as I get my stuff when the campaign's over and everything's printed, we're going to do an unboxing video of that, because I want people to see just the quality of the work that you do, because your books are gorgeous. They are meant to be displayed.
Yeah, and I'm doing a 4-color box that it ships in. The box itself is a work of art. They're full of stickers. They're going to be full of cloth embroidered patches. Just if you buy just the basic book, you'll get the patches and you'll get the stickers. You'll get other free comics. So we load them up with a lot of valuable stuff, posters and prints and things like that. So the leather book we're out of. So there was only 700 of those made that I understand you got in.
I did. Mm-hmm.
So that is going to be the rarest book I've ever made, by the way. It will likely be the most valuable book I've ever made because of that.
Well, I'm very welcome for that. So thank you. So we started out as fans of yours because of Earthworm Jim. We all launched the cow in 1994 and we're incredibly disappointed when we finished the game and see where it finally landed. For those of you who haven't played it, you need to do it. And those who haven't played any of the ports, go find them. It's an incredible game, great soundtrack, and incredibly funny to play. But your career has been filled with awards since Earthworm Jim. Neverhood was an incredible video game that you made that won a lot of awards. It was a new animation style using stop motion animation in a video game. It was great. And you got to work with one of the guys that I think is probably the kings of Christian music, with Terry Taylor from Daniel Amos. So talk to me about what that experience was like, and more than that, just the idea of having you, who is a Christian in a creative field that does not feel like you have to force religion into everything, and Terry, who is probably part of one of the greatest Christian bands of all time, that just the Jesus flowed out of their music instead of Jesus being forced into their music. What was that collaboration like?
I like that. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing with a Christian, is when your heart is filled with Jesus, he will come out. You can't for a Christian to be completely unaffected after having met Jesus, you're probably not a Christian. So he will change you in some way, and he will start coming out, not always as explicit on some people as others, but he's a takeover of the root system. And so you start producing different branches and different fruits. So Terry, and that includes the artist, right? So Terry was always doing music, and I was always doing art. And then you become a Christian, and that just starts pouring out of you. It's not that I don't have to ever concentrate and like white knuckle, get Jesus out, and, it just comes out. And I met Terry, I think I saw his band, the Swirling Eddies, play at the Troubadour, probably right around 1992. That was in Hollywood. And I was so intimidated by him because I listened to Daniel Amos, his band, all through the 80s. It really helped secure my salvation, and really was kind of my muse as an artist. It is for those guys who aren't familiar with Daniel Amos, get the albums like Horrendous Disc, Alarma, Vox Humana, Fearful Symmetry, and Darn Floor Big Bite. Those 5 albums they're like Beatles mixed with some Steely Dan, and Terry is just an artist. His lyrics are amazing. And he's very introspective, very much a critic of the church, if the church ever sells out, is kind of, which I think is where the band's name came from, Daniel and Amos being the 2 prophetic books of the Bible, that they're kind of warnings to what's coming. And that set pretty deep in my heart as a Christian and someone who is at war with culture. Terry was always there for me before I ever even knew him. So I met him. I went to this concert. I watched the Swirling Eddies play, and I was so intimidated, but I saw him up in the balcony looking over the top after the show. And I told my friend, I go, "Look, it's Terry Taylor." He goes, "Go meet him." I go, "No, I couldn't." Because I have this awe for him. He said, "Come on, I'll go with you." And he walked me up there, and I met him. And he was very cool. It was very minimal in rock god mode, very minimalist,
Right.
Well, then then one of the best man at my wedding, Joe Potter, was one of the main designers at Frontline Records. So he did a lot of their album covers for all those artists, tons of them, right? And I was doing a lot of illustration back then. And I said, you got to get me on a Daniel Amos album somehow. And he got me to do some of the liner note inks for Bible Land, which I think came out sometime in the early 90s.
Okay.
I did right around 93, because I know I was working on Earthworm Jim at the time. And I had put Terry's name in the bucket for doing the music on Earthworm Jim, but we already had Tommy Tallarico. He was a good friend of all of ours. He was the main man. So when I left to start my own company and we started the Neverhood, first guy I thought of, I go, and Terry Taylor's doing the music. And he'd never done video game music. He didn't understand video game music at all. But he just came and started hanging out at the company, because we were in Orange County and he was in Orange County at the time. And man, Terry and I just fell in love with each other, just hit it off. He's so thoughtful and just a deep pool of a man. Big heart, just super, way more gentle than I am, you know. And he loves artists, and he just loved the Neverhood. And man, from the first song he brought in on a cassette, the whole team, you know, many of the team were non-Christians or didn't know about Terry at all. From the first song he brought in on tape, they went, wow, that's it. And if you listen to the Neverhood soundtrack, Terry hadn't written much like that, you know, before. The background vocals do have kind of his weird X minor seventh, you know, chord, the kind of green sounding chord. But other than that, he was really going back to kind of old folky blues, kind of front porch, you know, jibber jabber kind of stuff. Very homey and a perfect marriage for clay animation. And even our palettes were kind of muddy with lots of ochres in them and stuff. So the music, you know, he'd bring in the brush, you know, on the drums and kind of slap the drums, which I think Ed McTaggart played the drums, who also played drums on Daniel Amos. And just nailed the music. Now his music ended up getting like album of the year or video game music of the year by this, you know, it was by far the most favorite part of the game. As charming as the rest of the game was, Terry was the star. And then he did Skull Monkeys, which again just got a little weirder even. And his bonus room song ended up influencing the musician on Portal to write the Eat Cake.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
Yeah, he credits Terry Taylor for giving him that idea, because it was a self-referential song about the game.
Right.
So it's just look up, if you guys want to look up Terry's song, look up Terry S. Taylor, Skull Monkeys, the bonus room song.
The bonus room. We'll have to check
the
that out.
bonus room song. You will cry laughing when you hear. It is the creepiest, weirdest, funniest song I've probably ever heard in my life. And we captured lightning in a bottle.
That's awesome.
Terry and I have been friends ever since. Just a good guy. Call each other every once in a while. He's a great bro. He's on Patreon, by the way, for those of you who want to support a great Christian artist who just pounds out music, explains all of his old Daniel Amos song, remixes them and re-releases them and writes new stuff. He's a prolific writer. Give him $5 on Patreon and he will put stars in your head.
That's awesome.
For sure.
I think all of our heads need more stars, especially after the Star of Bethlehem was shining last night. So, you've talked extensively about the difficulty that you've had with interacting in Hollywood, being a Christian, and then I want to get into a little bit of your time on VeggieTales as a showrunner, because you had difficulty in Hollywood being a Christian, and then you had difficulty with Christians taking something that was this cherished piece of what, and as much as I loved VeggieTales growing up, of bad art, and upgrading it to where it looked like something that was new, that was fresh, that fit all of the right lighting dynamics and things like that. And people immediately were like, no, Bob shouldn't have eyebrows. And then even the show creator, Phil Vischer, I remember one of the famous tweets that I saw about it before I ever watched the show was, this, I know Bob and this is not Bob.
Yeah.
Do you still,
I tore into
voice?
Phil so hard. I was on the phone screaming and cussing at him in a way that no Christian man should. But I'm so protective of my crew that I said, you're a member of this crew. And when you tear this show down, you're tearing down everyone's work, these kids that we hired, some of them on their first job. And their impression of you as a Christian is you're a piece of for doing this. I go, don't take money from the show and then tear it down. And that was my stand with him. I do totally support him as having a right to his opinion, right? That's a matter of aesthetic. He created it. He can believe and do whatever he wanted. I was only upset that he was going public with that stuff. And I wasn't allowed to blog on it. I had a gag order on me from DreamWorks. They go, you do not respond to the because they knew what I was about to do. They had the biggest lockdown on me. And I'm like, how come Phil Vischer can go run his mouth,
Yeah, they didn't want to start a civil war inside of their new kids show.
No.
Yeah. So Hollywood is just a normal liberal enclave, no different than academia or any other big media, big average art department, artsy. They hate Jesus. They hate God. They hate conservatives. They hate farmers. They hate their dads.
Yep.
They're just full of hate. And they're really nice people. So it comes out as, for most of them, it comes out in the most passive aggressive way, just quiet, constant, evil judgment and anger and spewing at the bride of Christ, at anything we believe in. And then there's the bomb throwers that are kind of more famous, who we all see in public. But at least I know those front lines. I learned how to operate in those front lines, and I believe that because Jesus purchased me, I have just a visceral response when someone attacks his character in front of me. I defend him. I virtue signal to him.
Yeah.
I go, screw you. You're a liar and you're wrong and you're evil. And what you say about him is wrong and ill-informed and ignorant. And I have no problem saying that. And they just freak because they're not used to hearing that. They're like, what?
Yeah. So what advice would you give to probably other people in the church? Because you seem to have an active stance in counterculture in the Christian world, and like you mentioned, in Hollywood and these other areas. For those who do want to resist the culture, what would you say to them?
That's a really tough question.
Thank you.
Because there's no right answer.
Yeah.
We've been quiet and we've had manners for so long that it implies that you're ashamed because you're wrong. So there are good pacifists and there's also cowardly Christians. So I don't know which one people are, but I don't call everyone to have my mouth. My mouth is obviously unique and uniquely hung on me. And it's also a burden, it's a terrible, sometimes it makes me commit terrible sins with my mouth, But I think at some point, if you never take a stand, then there's something wrong. You're a coward and not a pacifist or a monk. You're not being a gentleman. You're really afraid, and you couch it in, hey, I just try not to be too preachy. It's like, well, you're probably ashamed of Christ after he was stripped naked for you.
That's a pretty powerful response. I think
the Bible, real quick, the Bible says he bore our shame.
Yeah. And that's,
so I will not be ashamed.
I recently saw a quote from Hoist Gracie, the famous jiu-jitsu practitioner, and he said the difference between being a pacifist and being defenseless is knowing how to defend yourself. That if for him as a black belt in jiu-jitsu and one of the highest ranking jiu-jitsu practitioners on the world.
We watched him in the 90s in the UFC. During Earthworm Jim, we watched him just destroy everyone. Yeah,
he was a monster, but he was like, if someone comes up to me and I choose not to fight them, it's because I'm practicing pacifism. If I don't know how to defend myself and choose not to fight them, it's because I'm defenseless. I think that a lot of Christians fall into that same category. And to your other point about Christ bearing our shame, we recently, through our Christmas series, we were talking about the person of Jesus, and we looked at Jesus as the suffering servant. And there's a great book by Stephen Mansfield called Killing Jesus, where he goes into extreme depths looking at what he reimagines Jesus's flogging and scourging from historical accounts that he took. And we read that, and some of the initial feedback I got was, why is it necessary to be so gory in church? I was like, because this is what happened. And if we can't understand what happened, what was necessary to cover our sins, then it is something that we're probably more ashamed of than we'd like to admit. And so Danley and I met because we played music together. We were in a band of.
He played bass for me.
Yeah,
we have a long running joke where he says, "Oh, you played guitar for me." No, we were in a band together.
Yeah, which one of us played for the other one? But we were Christians who were in a band. We never really wanted to couch ourselves necessarily as a Christian band because we had this similar thought that if we're actually all sold out to Jesus, it's going to come through our music. Where do you think the biggest difficulty is for young, creative Christians right now in the pressures? Where do you find the balance between the pressures of you have to have Jesus in everything that you do, which is the pressure you get from the church, and you have to make good art, which is the pressure that you get from people who are going to spend money on what it is that you're doing? How do you find the balance between those two things?
And by the way, there's a new third pressure from the woke church that you also can't have Jesus in your work.
Yes, and I want to get into some questions about that here in just a minute, because your stance against that and specifically against some of your former VeggieTale colleagues is becoming more and more apparent.
Yeah. I believe, first of all, as an artist, we are to make what is true, good, and beautiful, tell the truth. It should be worthwhile. It should elevate the suffering of other people to some degree. So those are the main rules I follow, and you'll see there's nothing in that says what you can and can't do.
Right.
There's nothing in that says you must scrub Jesus out, because, I mean, what kind of movie would Passion of the Christ be if you scrubbed Jesus out of that movie? It'd be pretty short.
Yeah, just a creepy bald guy.
And even the secular world admits that's a great work of art.
Yeah.
Michelangelo's David. What if you scrub the Bible out of that? You just have a muscle man. It's the David. So I'm just saying, or Virgil, or Shakespeare, or, why does the world get to do all of the Christian work they want and all of the politics they want in their work, and then the right and conservative Christians are not allowed?
Excellent question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why does Quentin Tarantino get to quote the Old Testament in Pulp Fiction, but I can't quote the Old Testament in my work? Or, you know what I mean? It's like...
the difference is a gun, probably.
Then put a gun in it. All things to all men. Yeah. If that's what it takes to get the word out, let's go. So there's I just think there's no rules with art. And it's weird to me when a culture of illiterate, tasteless cowards start telling Christians what they can and can't put in their work. Instead, I would say, if you want to do your tribute to the gospel and to Jesus, or you want to spread the gospel through art, that's no less propaganda than what Warhol said about Campbell's soup cans. He had a subject and he talked about it. And you have a subject and you talk about it. And I don't get why Christianity is a taboo subject in the arts. Of course it's not. It never has been. It only is today because people hate Jesus. People hate conservatives. And so they're throwing out this lie that we're not creative. I will run circles around any other artist in the world with my creativity. I will beat you into the ground. I'm more creative, more prolific. I've made more stuff in more different mediums. No one has awards in comic books, video games, TV. I nuke them.
I love
So
it.
you can come talk to me and tell me